And if you've done research, you know this. It takes a long time to produce results. Trust me, for every paper that you see published, sweat, tears, and hard work. For me, I had done a master's, but I didn't even realize how much commitment the PhD was going in. I knew it was work, but I didn't even realize how much of it was going to take from me.
Susan Obi, and really excited. I'm excited for all the conversations, but we are continuing in the series Creating Space for Differences, Culture, Faith, and Religion. And last time I had Varsha on, we were in the same program in graduate school, and she is finishing up with her PhD, and I finished my master's in 2021. So today I am talking with another one of my friends that was in my program as well at Mizzou. Vivian finished with her doctorate in medical pharmacology and physiology and graduated last year and now is in the job market. Vivian was an international student, so Varsha actually gave me the idea of reaching out to Vivian, and I was like, that is such a good idea. We have not talked in a while, so it's going to be cool to just reconnect and just hear about everything that you're doing, Vivian. So thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Susan. And I'm more than happy to share my insights and experiences with you.
All right. So, Vivian, can you share just a little bit about who you are, your background, where you were born and raised, and then what you're currently doing right now and where you are?
All right. So I am a trained pharmacist. So in other words, my undergraduate degree was in pharmacy. I schooled at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. So for those of you that are really conversant with Nigeria, that is in Enugu State. Just going to dial back. I was born and raised in Onitsha. So that was in 1993. It's a long time ago. I was raised there for a while, probably about 5 to 6 years, and then we moved or my parents moved to Abuja, the capital of Nigeria, and I spent all like the rest of my life basically in Abuja. So yes, I had my undergraduate in pharmacy, and then I won a scholarship, the Commonwealth Scholarship. It was a shared scholarship, and that was to the University of Oxford. And I got my master's in pharmacology, and a lot of what I did was neuropharmacology, so brain research. And then I started looking into options for like further graduate studies because I was really interested in research at the time. At the time. So I moved to the US in 2018. I finished my program at Oxford in 2018, started in 2017, finished in 2018, then moved to the US in 2018. And my PhD, like Susan said, was in medical pharmacology and physiology. A lot of what I did was cardiovascular research, and that was at the University of Missouri, Columbia. I'm from a very big family. I have 5 other siblings, and some of them are here in the US. Some are still back in a lot, even more. I have back in Nigeria. So, yeah.
All right, that's awesome. So Oxford is pretty fancy, and I didn't know that you came from a big family. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
I have 5 brothers, and I'm the only girl. So we're 6 total.
Okay. And you said, so most of them are still in Nigeria?
Yes, most of them are still in Nigeria. I have a brother that is here in the US doing his like medical residency, but I have another one that is in Ireland as a software engineer, but the rest of them are still in Nigeria as well.
Okay, gotcha. So when you moved to London, England, to do your master's, that's where Oxford is, right?
No, people always make this mistake.
Wait, where is it?
I'm telling you, London is 2 hours and a few minutes by bus from Oxford. Oxford is a separate city on its own, and London is a separate city on its own. And so just thinking about Missouri, because we school together in Missouri. So Oxford is going to be in Kansas City, and then London would be in Columbia, essentially. So that is quite a distance, right? Like 2 hours drive plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
People always think Oxford is in London.
So people who are familiar with Europe are probably like, no, no, no. So, okay, I learned something new today. So, when did you know that you wanted to do your master's? Had you always planned to move out of Nigeria for advanced studies? And then why did you choose Oxford?
Yeah, so Prior to moving for graduate studies at Oxford, I had lived in Nigeria, lived and schooled in Nigeria completely for about 23 years, and I had not even left the country at all. So just in terms of plans, always I have known that I wanted to like further my education abroad and just get to experience, like different culture, meet diverse people, and just have like kind of shared experiences about, different things in general. And I was actually pretty excited of like living on my own in a different place for the most part. But I've always known that I wanted to do research abroad. And so I knew to the extent that once I finished my undergrad degree, even before going for what Nigerians call NYSC, so that is a National Youth Service that Nigerians mandatorily do for 1 year, for people that are not aware listening. I already got my transcript from the university, like literally the day I finished. I already had Wes assess my transcript. I had everything ready. By the time I was doing my NYSC program, I had started taking GRE, I had started writing TOEFL, I had started applying to lots of universities. And I was really fortunate that one of my brother, his roommates, so my brother was in medical school at UNEC, so Enugu campus of UNN at that time. His roommate had just come back from England as a Commonwealth scholar. And I'm going over to greet him and I'm like, hey, welcome back. And he's like, have you heard about the Commonwealth Scholarship? And I'm like, no, what is that? And he goes to like break it down for me. So understand, this was happening in November. The deadline was like first week of December, and I was just hearing about the scholarship. And so I had everything. I proceeded to apply, and I had a bunch of schools that I had applied to, including University College London. But Oxford, of course, was the big catch for me, and I felt like it would be like great exposure, but also great learning experience as a whole. And I was very fortunate. Of course, I got accepted and I got full funding to study in Oxford. And let me tell you, that included flights. Like I literally did not spend a dollar or now a pound for anything. They covered my visa fees, everything that had to do with my application, my tuition, and living expenses, all the while I was in Oxford. So, and it was such an amazing experience, I would say.
Talk about your experience. Why was it an amazing experience?
Yes. So for the first time, for me, it was the first time leaving my country, and I had traveled alone. So it wasn't like I went with my parents or a sibling, or no. I traveled alone, and I was so excited. And I stepped foot in England. It just felt like home. And this is something that is always very difficult for me to describe because I didn't have that feeling when I stepped foot in the US. And I don't know how to say explain, but really when I stepped foot, and maybe it's because a lot of things in Nigeria are modeled after England, because for those of us that know the history, Nigeria used to be a previous or prior colony to the British. So they were essentially a British colony. So they had a lot of things that were modeled after the British, including the education system. So, but it just felt like home. And it's a hard feeling to describe because even till today, whenever I go back to England, it still feels like home. Even despite the fact that at this point I've stayed more in the US than even in England when I lived. But yes, it was a great experience. I mean, they have all these like fancy castle-like buildings. So I just kept on turning like, what is this place? It was like stepping into a fairy tale. Everyone was super nice. Like everything was just a smooth transition for me. And even getting to the department, everyone was so nice. I had a lady, and I'll mention her. Her name is Barbara Zonta. She was the director of graduate studies. Let me tell you, this lady advocated strongly in the department for them to take me. And so she was just such a great advocate for international students, but especially for African students. And so I met her, and she just gave me this big warm hug, and I just felt like it was an aunt that I hadn't seen in a while, but that I just knew. So immediately I felt welcome. I felt welcome in Oxford, and really that defined my experiences throughout the time that I was there.
Okay, wow. Thank you for sharing that. So, I'm curious, when you're thinking about your experience in Oxford versus at University of Missouri, where did you see more Nigerians?
Oh, of course, of course, Oxford. Or let me say, of course, the UK. And when you think about it, the UK is just about 5 hours direct flight from Nigeria, to the UK. It's about 5 hours. First of all, Missouri is in the Midwest. As of when I started, I didn't feel like I saw a lot of Nigerians compared to when I was in the UK. But
And did you consider staying in Oxford for your doctorate?
absolutely, I did. See, I enjoyed my program so much that I cried the day I was leaving. I cried so much I was shaking. You know, like my supervisor was great. Shout out Dr. Tim. And my other supervisor in Missouri too was also Tim. Also shout out Dr. Jemiah.
Yes, he's
So I
awesome.
had two amazing teams that really defined my graduate education. But honestly, even the postdocs that were in the lab, they were so warm and welcoming. I just made true lifelong friends. And to this day, there are people from the department and really from the UK that I still call like my close friends. And I remember when I first came, it was my birthday in May, and you know I didn't want to celebrate. I'm not a huge birthday person, but I had a friend, Vicky, that just out of the blue just made like this huge sushi, pan for like the entire department, and just brought like cards, and it just felt so. I mean, how do you leave these people? It just felt so lovely, and just seeing people this kind, especially. So yeah, Vicky did something for me that I would until today. I still have that as a special memory. So Vicky was in my department, so pharmacology as well, and she just went out of her way to do this really kind and amazing gesture. So yeah, by the time I was finishing my masters, I wanted to stay in the UK by all means possible, because I mean I just had the right environment, right friends. Unfortunately, not funding, which is huge if you are an international student, right? Because you need funding for any degree, but also for a doctorate. And I'll also like to mention, as that was happening as well, I was also my boyfriend at that, or my fiance at that time, was living in the US. So it's ultimately boiled down to, I had to move to a different country again, because one, I didn't have funding to continue, but two, I was also getting married to someone that lived in the US. And so eventually I knew that I had to just drop that staying in the UK dream, and I moved to the US.
Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit later because I just remember there was you were doing a lot of wedding planning during the
I
time that we were
know. Yes, yes.
both at Mizzou. So,
So I moved to the US August 2018. The wedding was November. So you know what we call the bride price was December of 2018, and then the white wedding and traditional wine carrying was November 2019.
okay,
So
I actually want you to explain the bride prize and then the traditional wedding and the white wedding just because a lot of people probably don't know and I'm familiar with it, but I still want to hear
hmm
explanation.
so yeah, so this is in Nigerian culture, and for those that don't know, I am Igbo by tribe. So in Nigeria we have a lot of tribes, but particularly we have three tribes, three major tribes. So Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, and I'm from Igbo tribe, right? And so in the Igbo tribe, for the bride price honestly is the most important part of marriage for us. Okay, every other thing is fanfare. A lot of people don't even do the white wedding, but you see the bride price, that is it. And so the bride price basically is the groom and his family. So what we call the umuna. So his kinsmen essentially. So they come to your village or to your community and they ask for your hand in marriage. And so the girl's family is like, okay, well, look at, we are not selling our daughter. The groom's family, they're like, okay, but how about this? Price, and this is money we're talking about, right? So they have, like, usually where the girl is from, they have like a monetary figure, more symbolic than anything. Nobody's selling anybody, but it's more symbolic. And so they offer money to the lady's kinsman for her hand in marriage. And so usually what happens is that the lady's kinsmen, they return the money and they're like, no, we are not selling our daughter, but just take her and please take care of her, and let her live well, let her be well taken care of. So that is basically the idea behind bride price. Now let me tell you, if a man that wants to marry you does not do this bride price, you are considered unmarried in the traditional context. And let me tell you, even if you have kids, In your community, if you don't do this bride price, you're not really considered married per se. And the worst part of it is, even if you have kids with the man, be it 1 or 10, if that man doesn't pay a bride price for you, the lady, those children technically are not considered as the man's kids. And so if anything happens to those children, he cannot be buried in their father's land. He will be buried in the girl's community because you have not paid for her.
So for the bride, first thing for the bride prize, so the woman's family does not keep the money.
So the woman's family is made up of, and so this is something you have to understand about like Africa, or let me say Nigerian marriage traditions. It's not just the man and the woman or the man and the lady in question. Marriage is considered a family affair. And not just nuclear family like your parents, no. Extended family. And usually the people that are, you know, collecting this money is not even the girl's father. It is the designated kinsman or designated person in that clan, in that, that collects the money, not even the father. Because for us Nigerians, or for us in my tribe, you don't just belong to your parents, you belong to the community. And so we have a very communal, lifestyle, and everyone contributes in quotes to upbringing of the children. So yeah, back to your question. Yes, it's not the girl's father that takes the money per se. No, it's the kinsman.
Okay, and then what are some reasons that people will not do the bride prize? And I'm wondering if this is still as prominent as I guess it used to be. Like, are people still doing that in Nigeria?
Absolutely, 101%. The bride price for me happened in December of 2018. The traditional wedding where you see that ada, the girl is singing with palm wine in her hand, going to meet the groom. That is all traditional fanfare. The actual marriage happens in the parlor where the men are seated. So traditionally, the women are not allowed, not even the bride is allowed in that meeting. And the kinsmen of the two families agree, and they talk about, how much is the bride price, and then the girl's family say, no, we are not selling our daughter. This is all symbolic, okay? But then, or maybe they just take a little money and they said they'll just give the rest back, and they're like, no, we're not selling our daughter, just take care of her. That is the real marriage. And that is why even here in the US, for people that were born and brought up in the US but have, that traditional root or are from this tribe, they don't have to go back home to do this. Their parents or their grandparents do it on their behalf. So for every wedding that you see happening in the US that is Igbo based, they have already done the bride price in Nigeria. And I don't know if you remember, and this is just taking us back a bit, but the popular singer Davido
Yeah.
and Chioma, his fiance and now wife, when their son died, because Davido hadn't paid the bride price for Chioma, he could not bury Ifeanyi in his compound, in his father's compound.
Wow. That's really interesting. Every culture has their own thing. I'm sure
Hmm.
some people are like, what? I've heard people talk about the bride prize from a US context and just think about, so are they selling their daughter? Why do they have to collect money and things like that? But I'm like, it's just culture. And like you said, no one is selling anyone.
Mhm. No, no one sells anyone. But like in the US, and this is one of the huge differences, where marriage in the US is more of the couple, the actual man and the woman. Marriage in Africa and particularly in Nigeria, well, let me not say particularly, I don't know about other African tribes and cultures, but marriage in Nigeria is a family affair.
Your wedding pictures were just extremely elegant and so beautiful. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Yeah, the traditional wedding, I always love looking at pictures of that because it's like go everyone's going all out and the dressing and clothes. How many times did you change your outfit?
Oh, for the traditional wedding, I changed outfit 3 times. So I had the red. A lot of Igbo tribes, Igbo brides, they love red as their first outfit. Then I had a green, like with all the sequins and the gold trimmings on my green dress. And then I had the final gold, like all gold attire towards the end. So it's a long ceremony, but I had 3 dresses.
Yeah, so beautiful. Okay, so I want to talk about a comment you said when you stepped foot in the US, you didn't feel the same homey feeling that you had when you were in England. So, can you share a little bit about your experience moving in the US and adapting?
Okay, Susan, you have to realize that when I came from the UK, I literally stepped feet in the Midwest. I like I had just come from the UK where it was all, small and compact. And people that have visited, the UK, they already know this. It's a very small, compact place. And I just moved, like literally dropped straight into the Midwest. So I just basically just flew into Missouri. Like I had no knowledge of any other city in the US. I just dropped straight into Missouri. And even not just Missouri, but a small town in Missouri. So that was a huge difference. It was like literal night and day. And then you have to understand the US is massive, just in terms of like land mass and population, even, and just how spread out everything is. You know, and I was used to seeing a lot of buildings and just being able to walk everywhere. And all of a sudden, like all these buildings were like far apart. Like literally, I could not walk anywhere. I could not walk anywhere. Like for even like trying to get groceries, I had to like get an Uber or just have a car. So it was a huge difference, like day and night.
Did you fly into Colombia?
Yes, I flew into Colombia. I don't think I even had anyone to drive me. Like you schooled in Colombia. They have like this really small airport at that time,
Mm-hmm.
So I flew from Heathrow to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Colombia. So and I remember I arrived in the afternoon, and it was just like wild, wild west. Like everywhere was just empty. Everywhere was like grass. Everything was just spread apart. I don't even know how to describe it. Like everything was just like massive and just spread out. And there was all this like grass. And I'm like, oh my God, was this a bad choice? You know?
Columbia itself is semi lively. I mean, because it's a college town, so if you're in downtown Columbia, there's students, at least during the school year, people walking around, just things going on. But where the airport is like no man's land. So I can completely understand that feeling of just flying straight into Columbia, Missouri.
I know.
So what was your experience like just during your doctorate? So you flew into Columbia to start your doctorate at University of Missouri. How was assimilating to the culture of the Midwest for you?
Oh, okay. So one thing, oh, let me say this. The deciding factor for Missouri, for me, was the program, and in particular, my supervisor. So I really loved his research. I wanted to do it. I made the choice to do it. But apart from that, I felt like it was a good fit. And when people choose doctorate programs, they don't realize this. The most important thing is not so much the research as it is the person supervising you. And so with Dr. Jomaya, it was just a good fit from the first meeting. And you know him, he's such a lively personality. I just knew we were going to work well. Guess what? It turned out we had the exact same birthdays, month and date. May the 29th till the day we had the exact same birthday. I didn't even know that when I moved. It was later on that I realized that, oh my goodness, he's my birthday mate. Yeah, so my experience, my PhD was really stressful, but listen, almost everybody's PhD is so stressful. There's a lot of commitment and a lot of behind the scenes work that people don't realize. I honestly could not have done what I did without a supportive spouse. Just laying it out there because it was really something. And the second year of my program, I was pregnant. I gave birth also just right when COVID started. So it was rough. You understand me? But just in terms of like it was a really lonely time for me, especially doing like core research where we had to like spend long hours in the lab. This, I would spend hours, like literally the whole day and night sometimes in the confocal room. And that's a very dark place, if for people that know about confocal microscopy. It's a dark room, like literally. So it was really isolating. And I think with doctorate degrees, you really have to go out of your way to make friends, to make connections. And now the issue was that I had a family, right? So people are meeting up in the evenings or like for lunch. And I had the whole kid, So it wasn't funny. But it was really an eye-opening experience for me as well. We made it, I guess.
You made it. What would you say is something that you learned during that experience? Or what is something that was good that you got out of that experience? Actually, you can answer both of those.
Oh yeah, there was a lot. One, patience. You know, and if you've done research, you know this. It takes a long time to produce results. Trust me, for every paper that you see published, sweat, tears, and hard work. And that's why there's a lot of emphasis on like properly acknowledging authors and inserting references because it is a lot of work. And I even for me that I had done a master's, but I didn't even realize how much commitment the PhD was going in. And like I knew it was work, but I didn't even realize how much of it was going to take from me. So I learned patience. I remember when I first started doing experiments, they would not work. I would get so frustrated because it is frustrating. I'm talking about months of like commitment and in the end, nothing to show for it, right? So I had to learn how to be patient with myself, with the process, with my mice, my cells, the specimen I was working with. I learned patience. I learned the PhD. You know how they always say the PhD is a marathon? It is truly a marathon. And you don't run a marathon with the same speed or intensity that you run a 100-meter dash, right? So there's a lot of training and pacing and, trying to balance. I learned how to be determined. I think that's one of the major. Do you know today, if you ask me, what is the most important criteria for someone to do a PhD? I wouldn't even say being smart. You just have to be someone that is super determined, not to give up. That alone is more than enough to get a PhD. Nothing to do with smartness. It's more like long suffering and endurance. Because we went, and this is me having a great supervisor. Think about people that don't have great supervisors. That is a double smackdown on its own end. So, but yeah, and honestly, Missouri had its perks. It's a small town. People are super nice. They're friendly. I know people always say things about Missouri. There's also that aspect as well. But honestly, it's a place that, like, I feel like if I meet someone today and they tell me they're from Missouri, I just love them. There's always something now to talk about. Like, Missouri has a place in my heart.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. I think I also enjoyed my time in Missouri, and we were in the same program, different advisors. My
Mhm.
advisor was amazing and just made
Yeah.
my journey really smooth. Of course, I did my master's, so it was 2 years. So I was not in the lab all night, and there was no
Mhm.
point where I was like, I need to stay here all night, like maybe all day, but not anything past like 10 o'clock at night. So I know that PhD is definitely on a different scale. And I think that's really cool that you learned patience because that's just an important thing to have in general in
Mhm.
life. When you think about different seasons of life, patience is really important. So having that in the season while you're doing your PhD, which is multiple years, at least
Mhm.
3, 4, 5 years, it's really an important skill to have. Something I wanted to ask was, so can you talk a little bit about your research that you did, just a little bit about what you were doing, and then also what are some differences, if any, that you noticed with studying science within different cultures and countries, or did you find that it was just all the same thing, that science is science no matter what?
Yeah. So, my research, my doctoral research was focused on TRPV4 ion channels, and so and now I'm almost getting deep into the scientific explanation, but I'll just keep it real simple. The TRP channels, they are just this unique set of receptors in the heart, or unique set of channels in the heart that are osmosensitive, and what I was really looking at was how they are influenced or how they are changed or how they are trafficked in the case of aging. So, what happens to these channels when people age? And how does this influence, for example, the incidence of arrhythmias, ventricular arrhythmias, atrial arrhythmias, ventricular tachycardias, all that? That is the simplest way I can put it. But trust me, I spent months looking at ECGs of mice. Like even till today, I can draw it. It torments me. But yes, it honestly was something that I really enjoyed. Research in different countries, very different. I'm telling you, in Europe as a whole and in the UK, even aside research, they do make the commitment to have work-life balance. It's not just a statement. They really do it. I remember when I first came, and it was summer, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? And then my Barbara, who was the director of graduate studies, was like, no, 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 you have to travel, explore Europe. And I'm like, that's true. This is someone in the US. They're like, explore what? We research through the summer. We were working in the labs day in, day out, because, and then we would also have a presentation to the department and to new graduate students at the end of summer. So we were basically working throughout summer when I was in the US, or when I was a PhD student, you know, in the US. But in the UK, I noticed that we were more relaxed. The pace was more slow. You know, I don't even remember a time where I had to like come in at night. Like by 4 p.m., you see people actually closing and leaving, and we were encouraged to travel. And so, because of that, actually, I made not my first international trip, my second international trip, this time to France, because of what the director of graduate studies had told me that I should travel. This is summer, you have to travel. And I'm like, okay. And then I traveled to France, and that was a solo trip, but it happened to be one of the best trips of my life because, it was just fun as a student, just exploring, we were on a tight budget then, but we we made the trip, we made it work. But just for you to see the differences, just in terms of like, even work culture or education style, you understand me? And so by the time I came back, of course, you are refreshed, you are ready for whatever is next. Here in the US, we worked throughout the summer. By the time the fall semester starts, we were even more drained going into fall because literally there were no breaks. So that is something that I found really interesting. And then again, if you think about the PhD duration, in the UK it was 3 years for the PhD, maximum four. But literally, I hardly do I see people going beyond four. Not saying it's impossible, but really it's rare. Usually it's about 3 years for the PhD. Listen, in the US, I had friends that were like 7 years in, and I'm not talking about taking breaks for family or like parental. No, 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 no. I'm talking about day in, day out, back to back breaking work, and they still were like 7 years in the program, 8, 9 years in the program, prior to graduating. You understand me? And so I think it's just a testament of just the culture in the US where they're just like work. If you and even getting just just generally with the work culture in the US is work till you die, basically. And this is no joke. If you leave them, they're going to walk you to the ground. I'm talking about corporations, universities, anything really. They would walk you to the ground, you know. Um, but yeah, that was that, and that still remains a huge, huge difference. I do believe that trying to find that work-life balance is really tricky and tough in the US.
All right, thank y'all for listening to part 1 of this episode. So part 2 will be out in 2 weeks. If you enjoyed today's episode and have been enjoying the previous episodes, please leave a rating or review below. Whatever listening platform that you use, Apple, Spotify, leaving a rating or review would be very helpful. Also, follow the Instagram page. Check out the website, thebigpicturepod.com, and I actually have some tumblers on there, so make sure to check that out. And then lastly, make sure to follow the podcast on whatever listening platform that you use. That would also be helpful as well. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode, and see y'all in the next episode.